The day my wife looked at me and said, "You're just a store owner," something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not broken. Quiet. Like a door closing without a sound. She didn't shout it. She didn't need to. The way she said it, calm, dismissive, already halfway gone, hurt more than any insult ever could. Then she mentioned him. The club president. Sharp suit, loud laugh, borrowed confidence. A man who shook hands hard and talked louder, who lived on credit, applause, and other people's money. She packed a bag that same night and told me she deserved more. I stood in the doorway of my small electronics store the next morning, flipped the sign to open, and went back to work. That store had been my father's. One narrow shop on a busy street. We sold phone parts, repaired laptops, fixed things people had given up on. To her, it was small. To me, it was honest. I knew every screw, every wire, every regular customer by name. When she left, people expected me to collapse. Some whispered that I'd close within months. Instead, I stayed later. I listened more. I noticed patterns. Customers didn't just want repairs, they wanted speed, trust, and someone who wouldn't talk down to them. So I changed things. I standardized pricing. I hired 2 technicians and trained them myself. I built a simple website and offered pickup and delivery when no one else did. While she posted pictures in luxury lounges and expensive clubs, I was negotiating with suppliers at midnight. While the club president toasted champagne on credit, I was reinvesting every rupee back into inventory, logistics, and systems. I didn't chase money. I chased scale. 1 store became 3. 3 became 10. We added corporate contracts, schools, offices, hospitals. We built a refurbishment line for used devices and sold them with warranty. People trusted us because we fixed what others replaced. 3 months. That's all it took for the quiet work to start roaring. The day the valuation crossed 18 million, I didn't celebrate. I sat alone in my first shop, the old counter still scratched, the bell still chipped. I thought of my father. I thought of the night she left. I thought of the word, just a store owner. Just a man who kept showing up. Then the calls started. First from mutual friends testing the waters. Did you hear about? Then from her sister. She's not doing well. Finally, from her. The voice I knew by heart, softer now, careful. She said she'd made a mistake. She said the club president wasn't who he pretended to be. Debts surfaced. Sponsors vanished. The applause stopped. She said she missed me. She said she believed in me all along. They didn't just ask to come back into my life. They begged to come back into my world. The club president showed up in person. The same man who once smirked at my shop sign now stood under it, eyes lowered. He talked about partnerships, about opportunities, about how my little business had become impressive. I listened politely. I offered him water. I let the silence do the talking. Then I said no, not loudly, not cruelly, just clearly. I told my wife I had learned something important in those 3 months. Love that measures worth by titles will always leave when the room changes. Respect that disappears in hard times was never respect at all. I told her she didn't fall in love with someone better. She ran toward noise and mistook it for strength. I didn't take her back. I didn't take revenge with insults or humiliation. My revenge was visibility, stability, growth. I wished her well and closed the door the same quiet way it had once closed inside me. That night, I drove past the club where she used to pose for photos. Lights dimmer now, parking lot half empty. I went home, reviewed reports, approved bonuses for my staff, and planned the next expansion. I'm still a store owner. I just happen to own a lot more than anyone ever imagined, and I never needed to beg to be valued. I still remember the exact moment the word just landed between us, heavy and final. We were standing in the kitchen, the light above us flickering like it had been for weeks, and she didn't even look angry. That's what hurt the most. There was no fight, no raised voice, no tears, just a calm certainty in her eyes, as if she had already moved on in her head and was only informing me of a decision she'd made long ago. "You're just a store owner," she said, almost gently, as if softening the blow would make it hurt less. In that single sentence, years of shared struggle, late nights, and quiet sacrifices were reduced to nothing. Not a partner, not a builder, not a man with potential. Just a label she believed defined my ceiling. She talked about ambition like it was something loud and shiny, something that arrived in luxury cars and exclusive clubs. She compared my life to his without saying his name at first, describing the world. He moved in, the people he knew, the respect he commanded. I listened, nodding, as if she were explaining a weather forecast. Somewhere in her speech, the club president entered the conversation openly. She said it like it was obvious, like gravity. He had influence, he had status, he had connections. things I apparently lacked because my hands smelled of solder and grease instead of cologne and whiskey. I wanted to remind her how this store had paid our bills when no one else would, how it had survived economic crashes and pandemics, how it had kept us fed when dreams were still fragile. But I didn't. Words felt useless against a verdict already delivered. When she packed her bag, she didn't rush. She folded clothes neatly, chose outfits carefully, even asked where her other shoes were. It was the behavior of someone leaving with confidence, not fear. As she walked out, she didn't slam the door. She paused, looked back once, and said she hoped I would understand someday. That was the final cut, as if understanding meant agreeing that I was small. As if love had an expiration date tied to income brackets and social circles. The next morning, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Shops opened. Buses honked. People argued over prices. I unlocked my store like I had every day for years. The signs still read the same name. The counter still had the same scratches. The bell on the door still rang with that familiar, slightly broken sound. To the outside world, I was exactly what she had called me. Just a store owner. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of how the world judges worth. Not by effort, not by integrity, not by the quiet resilience of showing up every day, but by what can be seen, measured, flaunted. Customers came in unaware that my life had cracked open the night before. One complained about a delayed repair. Another asked for a discount, a regular joke that I should finally take a vacation. I smiled, nodded, fixed their devices. Inside, something was settling into place. Not rage, not heartbreak. Something colder and more stable. Clarity. I realized then that her words weren't just an insult. They were a mirror showing me how she had always seen me, even during the good years. The respect I thought existed had been conditional. As long as I stayed within her idea of success, I was acceptable. The moment someone sheenier appeared, I became replaceable. That realization hurt more than her leaving. It forced me to confront a brutal truth: love that needs proof in the form of status is not love. It's an investment looking for better returns. And investments move fast when they think a higher yield is available. She didn't leave because I failed. She left because I didn't look impressive enough to others. Because my success was quiet. Because my growth didn't come with applause. That day, as I counted the register and closed the shop late, I understood something else too. Being underestimated is a strange kind of freedom. When people see you as just something, they stop watching closely. They stop expecting much. They stop believing you're capable of change. And in that blind spot, real work can happen. I didn't promise myself revenge. I didn't swear I'd prove her wrong. I simply decided that no one would ever get to define my worth so cheaply again. Her words didn't break me. They stripped me down to something raw and honest. A man alone with his craft, his discipline, and his time. And as painful as that night was, it became the foundation of everything that followed. Because once you've been reduced to just something in someone else's eyes, you either accept it or you quietly build until that word no longer fits. After she left, people expected noise from me. They expected anger, drama, maybe even public embarrassment. Friends waited for the late night calls where I would rant or break down. Some probably hoped to hear that I was selling the store or taking a break, that the weight had finally crushed me. Instead, there was silence. Not the empty kind that comes from defeat, but the deliberate kind that comes from choosing not to explain yourself to anyone. I didn't announce my pain. I didn't post quotes about betrayal. I didn't ask anyone to take sides. I opened my shop every morning at the same time and locked it every night a little later than before. In those first few days, the silence was uncomfortable. The absence of her voice in the house made every sound louder. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator. Even my own breathing felt intrusive. But I learned to sit with it. I realized that silence forces you to confront yourself without distraction. There was no one to blame in those quiet hours, no audience to perform resilience for. Just me, my thoughts, and the truth that if my life was going to move forward, I would have to push it there myself. At the store, I stopped working on autopilot. For years, I had followed routines because they worked, but I had rarely questioned them. Now I questioned everything. Why did repairs take this long? Why did customers hesitate before agreeing to service? Why did some never return? I started listening more closely to the conversations happening across the counter. People didn't just want their devices fixed, they wanted certainty. They wanted to feel like someone competent was in control. I noticed how often they ask, "How long will it take?" and, "Is it worth fixing?" Those questions weren't about technology. They were about trust. Instead of talking about my personal life during slow hours, I read business cases, logistics strategies, customer experience studies. I watched how larger chains handled volume and how small shops survived on reputation. I wasn't trying to become something flashy. I was trying to become something solid. I wrote notes by hand, filled cheap notebooks with ideas that might never work. Some nights, I stayed after closing just to test new workflows, timing repairs, reorganizing shelves, labeling drawers so no movement was wasted. The discipline was quiet and repetitive. There was no motivation speech playing in the background. No dramatic turning point. Just showing up when no one was watching. When my phone buzzed with messages about her new life, photos someone forwarded, rumors whispered, I didn't respond. I didn't even open some of them. I understood that reacting would drain energy I couldn't afford to lose. Silence became my shield. It kept me from leaking focus into places that gave nothing back. I also learned to control my ego. There were days when a customer would disrespect me, speak as if I were easily replaceable. Before, I might have taken it personally. Now I treated it as information. If people felt they could talk down to me, something in the experience was failing, so I fixed that too. Clear pricing boards, professional invoices, a simple uniform for staff, small signals that said, without words, that this place was serious. At home, my life became minimal. I cooked simple meals. I slept early or not at all. There was no one to impress, no one to explain delays to. The loneliness was real, but it was also clean. It didn't come with confusion or mixed signals. Every decision I made answered only one question: does this move me forward? If the answer was no, I dropped it without guilt. Weeks passed like this, marked not by dates but by progress. Faster turnaround times, better supplier terms, customers recommending us without being asked. I didn't celebrate these wins. I logged them. Celebration felt premature. I knew how quickly things could collapse if I got distracted. Silence kept me grounded. It reminded me that success doesn't announce itself when it's being built. It whispers. There was a strange peace in being invisible. While others were busy broadcasting their lives, I was narrowing mine. While she was adjusting to a world that thrived on attention, I was building one that survived without it. I stopped needing validation. The work itself became enough. Each problem solved, each system improved, each customer who left satisfied reinforced the same quiet truth. Breakdowns don't have to be loud. Sometimes the most powerful response to being dismissed is to disappear from the noise and let your focus speak later. By the time people started noticing that something was changing, I had already changed. Silence had done its job. It had stripped away distractions, sharpened my discipline, and turned pain into fuel without letting it burn me alive. I hadn't fallen apart in public. I had rebuilt in private, and that made all the difference. What most people never understood was that the store didn't grow because I suddenly became lucky or ruthless. It grew because I stopped thinking of it as a place and started treating it like a system. For years, I had believed that working harder meant staying longer hours behind the counter, fixing more devices with my own hands. That mindset kept the doors open, but it also kept the ceiling low. After the silence settled in and my focus sharpened, I realized the uncomfortable truth. As long as everything depended on me, growth would always be limited to my energy and time. If I wanted something bigger, I had to build something that could breathe without me standing over it. The first shift was letting go of control in the right places. I hired 2 technicians who were skilled but inconsistent, the kind most shop owners avoided because training them took patience. I didn't just teach them how to fix devices, I taught them how to think, why a repair failed, how a customer judged trust before price, why honesty about delays mattered more than speed. I paid them fairly, not generously, but with clarity. Good work meant stability. Carelessness meant consequences. Slowly, the store stopped feeling like a one-man operation and started feeling like a machine that could run smoothly. Then came standardization. Before, prices changed depending on mood, urgency, or how convincing a customer sounded. That chaos cost trust. I introduced fixed pricing, clear timelines, written warranties. Customers stopped negotiating and started deciding faster. Decision speed, I learned, was everything. The faster a customer felt confident, the faster money moved through the business. What looked like a small operational change quietly multiplied daily revenue. I expanded services not by guessing, but by watching. People kept asking what to do with old phones, broken laptops, devices that weren't worth repairing. Others asked for cheaper alternatives to new products. So I created a refurbishment line. We bought damaged devices in bulk, repaired what could be saved, replaced what couldn't, and sold them with warranty. The margins were higher than repairs, the risk manageable. It turned waste into inventory and hesitation into opportunity. The store layout changed next. I redesigned it so customers could see technicians working instead of hiding behind walls. Transparency built confidence. When people see effort, they value it more. I added a simple ticket system so no repair felt forgotten. Suddenly, complaints dropped. Repeat customers increased. Word of mouth spread quietly but steadily. Once the first store stabilized, I didn't rush into expansion. I documented everything, every process, every mistake, every solution. I treated my own business like a case study. Only when the system worked without me present did I open the second location. Same layout, same pricing, same rules. Different neighborhood. It worked again. That's when I knew this wasn't luck. It was repeatable. Suppliers who once ignored my calls started returning them. Volume changed the conversation. I negotiated better terms, faster delivery, exclusivity on certain parts. What saved me money also protected me from competitors. While other small shops struggled with shortages and price swings, I had stability. Stability is invisible power. Customers don't notice it directly, but they feel it when nothing goes wrong. Corporate contracts followed naturally. Offices, schools, small hospitals needed ongoing maintenance, not one-time fixes. I didn't chase them with flashy pitches. I showed them data, turnaround times, failure rates, cost savings. I spoke their language. They signed because reliability matters more than charisma when systems are involved. As locations multiplied, I stepped further back. Not away, but above. I reviewed numbers daily, visited stores weekly, trained managers monthly. I stopped touching tools and started shaping direction. That transition was uncomfortable at first. My hands missed the work, but my mind was finally free to see the bigger picture. Growth accelerated the moment I stopped confusing effort with impact. People assumed the business exploded overnight. They didn't see the months of trial, the failed ideas quietly abandoned, the nights spent fixing problems no customer would ever know existed. They didn't see how each store funded the next, how cash flow was protected, how debt was avoided. While others chased fast growth and collapsed under it, I built slowly enough to survive mistakes. By the time analysts put a number on the company, the Million Valuation didn't feel unreal. It felt late. The value had already been there, embedded in systems, people, trust, and scale. Money simply arrived to recognize what discipline had already built. That's the irony of it all. What started as a small store became powerful not by trying to look impressive, but by becoming undeniable. While some chased attention and status, I chased structure. And structure, once built properly, grows even when you're not watching. Those 3 months didn't feel heroic while I was living them. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, no single day where everything suddenly changed. Instead, it felt like waking up every morning with a quiet weight on my chest and choosing, again and again, not to put it down. Relentless execution sounds powerful when people say it later, but in real time it's boring, exhausting, and unforgiving. It's doing the same right things even when nothing seems to reward you for it yet. Especially then. Every day followed a rhythm I designed on purpose. I arrived before anyone else, walked through the store, checked inventory levels, reviewed pending repairs, and scanned yesterday's numbers. Not to admire them, but to question them. Why was this repair delayed? Why did sales dip during this hour? Why did one technician outperform another on the same tasks? I didn't accuse. I observed. I treated the business like a living thing, constantly listening for symptoms before illness could spread. While they were busy living loud lives, I was living precise ones. I didn't spend money to feel successful. I spent it to remove friction, faster to better software, smarter shelving, small investments that shaved minutes off tasks. Minutes became hours. Hours became capacity. Capacity became growth. It wasn't exciting, but it was effective. I refused shortcuts. That was the biggest difference between us. The club president built his image on borrowed shine. Connections he didn't nurture, deals he didn't fully understand, promises he couldn't sustain. I watched people like him before. They climb fast, but they're always running from gravity. I built with gravity in mind. Cash flow mattered more than headlines. Repeat customers mattered more than viral moments. Profitability mattered more than looking rich. There were temptations, of course. Investors reached out early, sensing momentum. They offered fast capital with strings attached. I said no. Speed without control felt dangerous. I wanted ownership of direction, not just ownership on paper. I had learned what happens when you trade control for comfort. I wasn't about to repeat that mistake in another form. Exhaustion became a constant companion. Some nights I slept on the office chair. Some mornings I stared at the mirror and barely recognized myself. But there was something grounding about the tiredness. It was honest. Earned. It didn't disappear with applause, but it also didn't collapse when attention moved elsewhere. I reminded myself daily that this wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about building something that couldn't be taken away, because someone changed their mind. While their world began to crack, mine quietly reinforced itself. Rumors reached me through customers and suppliers. Missed payments. Sponsors pulling out. Events canceled last minute. The same man who once represented more was now scrambling to keep up appearances. I felt no joy hearing it, just confirmation. Image can't survive without substance for long. By the end of the third month, the numbers told a story that words couldn't. Revenue had multiplied, margins stabilized, operations scaled without chaos. External valuation firms didn't see a shop owner anymore. They saw infrastructure. They saw predictability. They saw growth that wasn't dependent on hype. When the under TM figure was placed on the table, it felt almost clinical. No fireworks, no disbelief, just a quiet acknowledgement that the work had compounded faster than most people imagined possible. That's when the world's tone toward me changed. Messages shifted from curiosity to admiration, from silence to praise. People who had once spoken slowly to me, as if I wouldn't understand, suddenly asked for advice. They wanted to know how it happened so fast. I didn't explain much. Not because I wanted to be mysterious, but because most people don't actually want the answer. They want a shortcut, and there wasn't one. The real difference was discipline under boredom, execution without witnesses, decisions made when outcomes weren't guaranteed. While others invested energy into looking successful, I invested it into becoming stable. Stability is unattractive at first. It doesn't photograph well, but it survives storms that attention never can. When they finally came back into my orbit, it was with humility they had never shown before. They spoke carefully now, choosing words that once came easily. They talked about mistakes, misunderstandings, timing. But I saw the truth clearly. They weren't drawn back by love or respect. They were drawn by gravity, the same gravity they had underestimated. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. What I felt was distance. Not physical, but emotional. The gap between who I was during those 3 months and who they still were felt too wide to cross. I had built something real in the quiet, something that required me to change internally as much as externally. They were still chasing reflections. Relentless execution doesn't just build wealth, it reshapes identity. By the time success became visible, I no longer needed validation from the people who once dismissed me. The work had already answered every question they could ask. And that was the moment I understood the deepest truth of it all. The best revenge isn't winning loudly. It's outgrowing the room so completely that the past can't reach you anymore. When the tables finally turned, it didn't happen with a dramatic announcement or a sudden apology. It happened subtly, almost awkwardly, the way reality corrects people who have been living in illusions for too long. At first, it came as curiosity disguised as concern. Old acquaintances started asking questions they had never cared to ask before. "Are you still running that shop?" Quickly turned into, "I heard you expanded." Their tone changed before their words did. Respect always arrives late, pretending it was never absent. Then the messages became more direct. Friends who had gone quiet after she left suddenly reappeared, checking in as if nothing had happened. They spoke carefully, measuring each sentence, clearly aware that the balance of power had shifted. I could feel it in the pauses, in the way they waited for my reactions. People who once assumed I would always be available now asked for time, for meetings, for advice. The same world that had reduced me to just something was now trying to redefine me on its own terms. Her name returned to my life through others before she reached out herself. "She's struggling," someone said, lowering their voice like it was confidential information. Another said, "Things didn't work out the way she expected." I listened without reacting. I wasn't cold, I was simply no longer emotionally invested in outcomes that didn't belong to me. I had spent months detaching my sense of worth from other people's approval. I wasn't about to reconnect it now. When she finally called, the confidence that once filled her voice was gone. She spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word needed permission. She didn't start with love or apology. She started with nostalgia, memories, shared jokes, moments she assumed still held power over me. It was a familiar strategy, softening the ground before stepping forward. But the ground had changed. I had changed. She talked about how hard things had been, how the lifestyle she chased came with pressure she hadn't expected, how the club president wasn't the man he presented himself to be. Debts, egos, instability, things that don't show up in curated photos. She said she felt lost. She said she missed the simplicity, the safety, the man who was always there. She said leaving had been a mistake. Not long after, he reached out too. The same man who once embodied everything she thought I lacked. His message was polite, almost formal. He spoke about mutual benefit, collaboration, opportunities to do something together. It was clear he had done his homework. He knew the numbers, the growth, the valuation. He wasn't reaching out because he respected me. He was reaching out because he needed leverage. When we met, the contrast was impossible to ignore. The confidence that once filled rooms now felt forced, brittle. He talked more than he listened, a habit I recognized immediately. People who rely on image often do. I let him speak. I asked simple questions. The more he explained, the clearer it became that he wanted access, not partnership. Stability he could lean on. Credibility he could borrow. That was the moment I fully understood the nature of the begging. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no kneeling apologies. It was subtler, and in some ways more revealing. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for re-entry. Into my world. Into the security they once dismissed. Into the future they no longer knew how to build on their own. I felt a strange calm listening to them. Not satisfaction. Not revenge-driven pleasure. Just clarity. The same clarity that had guided every decision over the past months. I saw them clearly now, without longing or resentment distorting the view. I saw how quickly admiration follows success, and how conditional loyalty often is. I saw how people confuse comfort with love and status with substance. When I declined, I did it without bitterness. I didn't list their mistakes. I didn't remind them of their words. I didn't need to. My refusal wasn't punishment, it was alignment with who I had become, with what I valued now. I had learned that access to my life was not something earned by returning when things fell apart. It was something built over time, through consistency and respect. They were surprised by how calm I was. People expect revenge to be loud, emotional, even cruel. They don't expect it to be quiet and self-assured. They don't expect you to walk away when you finally have the upper hand. But that's exactly what made it powerful. I didn't need to prove anything. The fact that they were asking was proof enough. After that, the messages slowed, then stopped. Life moved on again, this time in a different direction. I didn't feel like I had won against them. I felt like I had outgrown the version of myself that needed their validation. The begging wasn't the climax of the story. It was just confirmation that the work I had done in silence had changed the balance forever. And in that realization, I found something far more valuable than revenge. Freedom from the need to be chosen by people who only see your worth once it becomes useful to them. Walking away was harder than saying no. That surprised me. Refusal, in the moment, felt clean and simple, almost automatic. But the real test came afterward, in the quiet spaces where old habits try to return. When you've spent years tying your identity to being needed, to being the reliable one, to being chosen, letting go of that role can feel like losing a part of yourself. Even when you know it's the right choice. Especially then, there were moments when memory tried to soften the past. A song on the radio. A familiar street. A version of her laughing in my head, untouched by disappointment or regret. The mind has a way of editing history, smoothing rough edges, making old wounds look manageable. I had to resist that pull deliberately. Not with bitterness, but with honesty. I reminded myself why I had drawn the line, not to punish anyone, but to protect the person I had become while rebuilding everything from the ground up. Self-respect isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's built through small, often uncomfortable decisions made consistently. Choosing not to reply to a message you know will reopen doors better left closed. Choosing to sit with loneliness rather than trade it for familiar chaos. Choosing growth over comfort, even when comfort comes wrapped in apologies and nostalgia. I noticed how differently I carried myself after that. My decisions became quieter, firmer. I no longer explained them unnecessarily. When people asked why I didn't reconcile, I didn't give speeches, I said, it wasn't right for me anymore. That sentence felt strange at first, almost selfish. But I learned that boundaries often sound selfish to people who benefited from you having none. The business continued to grow, but it no longer defined me the way it once had. Success stopped being a shield and became a tool. I invested in my team, my health, my time. I took mornings off occasionally. I traveled without checking emails every hour. For the first time, my life felt balanced, not in the sense of perfect harmony, but in the sense that no single loss could knock everything over. What struck me most was how little anger remained. I had expected some lingering resentment, some desire to be seen or acknowledged. Instead, there was indifference, and not the cold kind, the peaceful kind, the kind that comes when you fully accept that some chapters end, not because they failed, but because they taught you everything they could. People often think revenge is about making others feel the pain they caused you, but pain is temporary, and so is the satisfaction of inflicting it. True revenge, if you can even call it that, is refusing to carry what no longer serves you. It's living so aligned with your values that the people who once dismissed you no longer have a place in your emotional economy. I realized that if I had taken her back, or partnered with him, I would have been betraying myself in a deeper way than they ever did. I would have been saying that growth was negotiable, that respect could be retroactive, that my boundaries could be bent when someone returned at the right moment. And that would have undone everything I worked to build, not the business, but the man behind it. There was a quiet pride in choosing differently, not pride rooted in ego, but in integrity. I knew what it took to become who I was now. The nights of doubt, the discipline under boredom, the willingness to be misunderstood while building something real. Letting people back in simply, because they now saw my worth, would have cheapened that journey. Over time, new relationships formed, slower, healthier ones. People who valued consistency over spectacle, who asked questions and listened to the answers, who respected the work without needing it to define me. I didn't rush into anything. I didn't feel the need to replace what I had lost. Loss had stopped feeling like a hole and started feeling like space. When I look back now, the moment she called me, just a store owner, feels distant, almost unreal. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it no longer defines me. That moment didn't shrink my life, it clarified it. It showed me how easily people mistake noise for value, status for substance, and comfort for love. I didn't win by becoming richer or more successful, though those things happened. I won by refusing to return to a version of myself that accepted less than he deserved. I won by choosing self-respect over reconciliation, clarity over nostalgia, and growth over revenge. And that's the quiet truth most people never understand. The strongest ending isn't when others beg to come back. It's when you no longer need them to.